Okay, well, welcome back to the Aurovine podcast. This is where we get to promote some of our fine aspiring bands and artists on Aurovine. Every 2 to 3 weeks or so, we'll host a new podcast on the Aurovine homepage, and that will feature 2 to 3 different artists, maybe in each, around 20 to 25 minute sessions. So today's session, we'll be looking into how cover band Hooyoosay do business within the world. But first, I'd like to introduce Ken. In fact, how are you doing, Ken?
Hi Dave, yeah, really good, thank you. Hooyoosay actually do their own material, but probably better known for their Rolling Stones album, which is their first album, which is a strange kind of choice, but they're a strange kind of band, which we'll discover later on.
Absolutely, we'll come back to those in just a second. We've got plenty to talk to. Very interesting, actually, doing some research on those guys. But first, we're going to introduce you to George Thomas for the first of our sessions today. George was born and raised in Massachusetts. He's a former teacher and became singer-songwriter. George fills his songs with passion and vivid detail. This is detail taken from his profile actually on Aurovine, and which is very interesting. Thomas's music is personal, political and universally appealing. Thomas's thought-provoking lyrics and dynamic mix of acoustic and electric guitars, symphonic percussion and background singers carries a feeling to all his listeners. His work has been stated as a mix of the Moody Blues and Roy Orbison. Yah, which is the band, and George Thomas are totally original. I can see where the Roy Orbison connection comes into if you listen to his voice.
Yeah, that came through for me more than...
Elvis came through for me more than anything else, to be perfectly frank. But obviously it's down from that 50s Memphis time.
Yeah, there are a few sorts of kind of string arrangements in that permeate his songs, and that's probably where the Moody Blues thing comes from.
There's quite a few influences now. I found these quite interesting, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail. First, I think we'll listen to a track. This is one we've picked out as being one of the more favourites of mine. I think it's one of my favourites out of the two we're going to play this evening. But this is called "Love Is All You Need to Know."
This was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. This was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. This was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. 'Cause this is pure love. 'Cause this is pure love.
Love is all you need to know. Love will take you anywhere you need to go. If you find yourself in trouble, call out for love. It will be there on the double.
To me, this was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. This was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. 'Cause this is pure love. 'Cause this is pure love. میخوام تنه قشنگ تو بغلم بگیرم بگم مگه نباشی کارم تمومه و بدون تو میمیرم.
I'll show you the way to go. She said, come on, follow me. To the darkness and sorrow I followed behind. You'll always find a brighter tomorrow. With love all things become new.
To me, this was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. This was just meant to be. You were coming back to me. 'Cause this is pure love. 'Cause this is pure love.
for you. I won't let anything happen to you. If you find yourself.
So, like I say, interesting sound and direction there. There are obvious comparisons. That particular track does seem to flow quite well. It's quite generic in what it's trying to do from a rock pop perspective. But what really struck me with his certainly the arrangement was there is a definite feel of a traditional rock feel. He's got the Roy Orbison, that effect, the Moody Blues effect, but he's trying to quite cleverly, whether he's pulling off, I'm not entirely sure, but it's quite cleverly trying to make him a bit more of a modern sound out of what he's doing.
Yeah, the songwriting is really strong. I felt throughout the. Well, he's got 7 albums on Aurovine, so quite prolific.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good songwriting, and you kind of get that vibe that publishing might be something that George can look at going forward, because some of those songs, you know, are probably strong enough to get covered by other people, and as we know, people are always looking for original material. So. But yeah, no, that's not to say anything against the way these tracks are produced, and he's used backing vocals. You know, there's some good blues guitar in there, some good production quality. So yeah, it's quite a mixed bag really, and he's thrown a lot of different influences into his stuff.
Yeah, I mean that I was going to comment on that myself. In fact, just going back to the publishing side, I totally agree with you there. I think I agree with what they say in terms of being totally original. I think his voice is exceptionally original. It's that originally put across that you would have to say, you know, it would probably work for. It narrows it down in terms of what kind of things it would work for. But I think the original tracks would probably fit into a couple of, say, B-movie type scenarios. I think he's already had some success on the publishing side as well, so definitely follow that through. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if anyone does come and pick up through the publishing side. Obviously Aurovine can help with that. But one of the criticisms I did sort of find with this is because a point you just mentioned there in terms of the influences, there are, I feel, a lot of genres trying to fight it out in the tracks. And I think, you know, back in the day when I was involved with a band, one of the we got some really good publicity, but really good feedback on one of the tracks, one of the EPs we put together. But the big criticism point is that there was too many genres going on. Is it this type? Is it this type? And when you're looking for people to represent you in terms of management and maybe even, you know, an individual label, they will look to try and pigeonhole, and that's rightly or wrongly. People want to pigeonhole you where you are because that's how you market it. And
yeah,
you know,
I can relate to that, because your band Visual Silence had the same thing going on. You know,
absolutely.
You could have like an electronic pop thing followed by a completely random ballad, and it was I was wondering whether it was the same band. And to a certain extent, although it's good in a way that people are so versatile, like you say, the industry wanting to pigeonhole everything, you know, they kind of will remember you more if you do stick to a genre, perhaps more than if you're dabbling in lots of different genres at the same time.
Absolutely, I think it's something he needs to watch out for. If he could try and hone in on that and say in his next release, next album, EP, he works on that could be quite an interesting output.
Yeah, well, let's hear some more.
Okay, well, Gary Moore is a name that will pop up a little bit more, excuse the pun, in today's session. It'll come up a number of times as we talk about Hooyoosay later on. But I've picked this final track, and if you listen to, obviously compare it to the first one, which was Love Is All You Need to Know, House of Mirrors is actually, from what I understand, one of his earlier tracks, and it's really quite electronic again. It's got a lot of sort of 80s influence, and Gary Moore was certainly a name that popped into my head when I heard this one. So see what you think. This is called House of Mirrors.
I got lost in my house of mirrors. I kicked the door open and started to scream. I got lost in my house of mirrors. Found myself trapped in the worst of dreams. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. find the love, we'll surely all die. Now the winds are getting stronger, the sun is burning through longer and longer. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? You get a hole filled with dirt, it's the only place that's safe on this earth. Unless we find the love, we'll surely all die. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I wish things secret somehow, but everyone's lying their mouth. We keep our history in, but never knowing the enemy within. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Unless we find the love, we'll truly die. Nowhere to run. I wish things secret somehow, but everyone's lying their mouth. We keep our history in, but never knowing the enemy within. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Unless we find the love, we'll truly die.
So there you go. Another interesting track there. I quite like the keyboards in that. Being, if you listen to Visual Silence, you hear that kind of an influence in there also.
Yeah,
So
would you say 80s, the 70s, 80s influences in there, and probably later than that, isn't there, with some of the electronic stuff, the dance stuff that he does as well?
I think when it goes into the 70s, you could probably talk about that a bit more than myself.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I would agree with that. The definite end product sounds like a sort of mid-80s type product for me, which is very interesting again, because right now, even though that was one of his earlier tracks, that type of electronic sound is very much making a comeback right now in the charts. It's definitely a new romantic feel to them in the charts these days, which is quite interesting. So maybe it's worth having a reshuffle around. He could probably, looking at what he's got on Aurovine, he could probably put together a best of, which will be a really interesting release.
Yeah, and there's some CDs to give away.
Yes, we've got our first competition in these new set of podcasts coming up, very kindly given to us by George. This is the album, I can't remember which is one, second or third, In Another World, and we've got a number of these free CDs. If you can give me an email address to use for this, Ken, if you send your name and full postal address to
competitions@aurovine.com.
That's competitions@aurovine.com. Then you will receive one of the free albums that are going at the moment. There are a limited edition. I think we've got only about 9 or 10, so get them in.
First 9 or 10.
First 9 or 10 comes will be served. And the question is, what is GT's real name? What is GT's real name? Answers in an email to competitions at aurovine.com, and the first 9 of 10 will receive a free album. So there you go. That's George Thomas.
And don't forget to put your name and address for the postage if you're going in for that.
Full postal address, if you could. Fantastic. Okay, so that's the first of our artists for this week. We can now move swiftly on without shuffling our papers too much.
Hooyoosay.
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 I think we'll start this one, Ken.
Yeah.
Video.
Yeah. Let's play a video.
This is a good place to start. This is a bit of a mishmash, if they say, or a mashup.
A lot of the tracks seem to be two albums.
Certainly
Sorry,
on YouTube.
two tracks segued into another.
From a visual perspective, yeah, I thought these were more interesting to play. We didn't have a video from George, so we're going to start with a video here from Hooyoosay, which is interesting, and they put a mash together for Time Is On My Side and Who's Been Sleeping Here, both early Rolling Stones tracks.
For good times, but just wait and see. You'll come running. I said you would, darling. You'll come running for the rest of my life for you, baby. You'll come running back to me. Go ahead, baby. Go ahead and light up the town. And baby, do anything your heart desires. Remember, like a Goldilocks. There must be somewhere you can stop. Yes, there's the noseless old newsboy, the old British brigadier. Yeah, the world tells me now who's been sleeping here.
So there you go. Very interesting. The more I look into these guys, the more interesting I find, because certainly as we'll go through the profile now, just to give a bit of background to these guys, those two tracks and a number of, I think the other two that we're going to play later on are also on their current album. This is from the album In Decay. Very much available on Aurovine, of course. So all these tracks you'll hear this evening are on Aurovine, so you can log on and search for them. And Hooyoosay have undertaken the adventurous task, and it is a very adventurous task, of presenting 22 new versions of songs that were recorded by the Rolling Stones during the mid-60s. Allegedly, and I did not know this, the Rolling Stones were actually a cover band themselves in the early days, which is very interesting, and then soon developed their own songwriting skills. A wide variety of composers and musical styles is on offer as well, ranging from Chicago blues, rhythm and blues, Chuck Berry, rock and roll, guitar pop, top 40 and classic rock to acoustic pop rock. So they've pulled together quite a few genres into this to give their own version.
Yeah, a lot of them are covers of covers, aren't they? Because there were so many cover tracks on the early Rolling Stones albums.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one that we'll play later on, Don't You Lie To Me, is a classic example of that. The idea of doing this album, apparently, from what they were saying, that it brings a collection of fresh renditions of older songs, such as you said there, which are certainly not new at all. Similar projects have been done by, and this is what I was quite interested in as well, because I was looking to see who else has done this type of thing. B.B. King, Jimmy Rogers, Jerry Lee Lewis, Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings, and Susan Boyle, to name a few.
They've all done Rolling Stones covers albums.
I think they've all done similar projects in so much as they've done, I don't know whether it's Rolling Stones, I could be corrected on that, but I think in terms of doing
full albums
of covers of some other original
David
artists.
Bowie, of course, Pin-Ups was one as well.
There's probably quite a few. I was looking around for some, but those were the only ones I could find at the time. But the difference for these guys, so they say, for Hooyoosay, is that it's a studio project only, so no gigs or tour dates to be expected.
It's almost like the more you look into Hooyoosay, the less you find, because they're very mysterious. No names, no location.
And that's a big part of what they...
yeah, they could be anybody. They could be the Stones themselves.
I like this. I like this. I like when you mentioned this the other day. I quite like the idea of this being the Rolling Stones themselves. And when I was listening back to those tracks, I was thinking, maybe they've got a different member of the band singing it rather than actual Mick himself, to just give it a little bit of an edge. But very, very interesting concept, that, and maybe it is. Who knows?
Okay, Dave. What's this next video we're going to play by Hooyoosay?
Well, okay, we'll bring in the Gary Moore influence back in again. We mentioned it earlier with George, and this is another video with a mashup. It's a track called Don't You Lie To Me and Uplar. Now, Don't You Lie To Me was written by a chap called Hudson Whittaker, which is a really old blues song, and if you do some research on it, as I did try, you'll find that there's quite a few versions of that particular track. What the guys have done here for Hooyoosay is they've put their own track in there called Uplar, which is very much a summery type track that they're pushing for a summer sound, and they've kind of mashed it in with Don't You Lie To Me, and it's their version of Don't You Lie To Me. It's not a complete and utter same track.
Well, it's a separate track on Aurovine, but for the video they've stuck it on the end of Don't You Lie To Me.
Okay, so they've been quite creative with how they've gone about this. So it's there's definitely some version of it on Aurovine, and this is their video for that. So let's have a look at this.